My daughter removed me from her wedding guest list and replaced me with her stepfather, so I cut her off and left her a final message she never forget. I'm a 52-year-old man, and I raised my daughter on my own after her mother walked out when Emily was just 8. I still remember the night it happened, the slammed door, the echo of silence that followed. And my little girl standing in the hallway clutching her stuffed rabbit asking, "Is Mom coming back?" I didn't have the heart to tell her no, so I just knelt, hugged her, and said, "It's you and me now, kiddo." The years that followed were brutal. I worked double shifts at the warehouse, sometimes grabbing dinner from vending machines because every extra dollar went to her school books and dance lessons. There were nights I'd come home so exhausted that I'd fall asleep on the couch still wearing my work boots, only to wake up to a drawing she'd made of us on the coffee table, me. Her and a big sun smiling above our heads. Those little gestures kept me going when I felt like collapsing. I tried to give Emily a life that didn't feel broken. I learned how to braid her hair, sat through every parent-teacher meeting, and clapped the loudest at every recital. Whenever other parents looked at me, the single dad in oil-stained jeans sitting among polished couples, I held my head high. Because I wasn't embarrassed. I was proud once, after her school play. Emily wrapped her arms around me and whispered, "You're my hero, Dad." I didn't cry in front of her, but when she went to bed that night, I sat in the dark and let the tears fall. I'd promised myself that no matter what, she would always feel loved, protected, proud of her father. If only I'd known how fragile that promise really was. It had been nearly a decade since Emily's mother Laura left us. I'd long accepted that chapter was closed until one afternoon. Emily came home from college break with a strange mix of excitement and hesitation in her voice. "Dad," she said, Mom reached out. "She wants to see me." For a second, I froze. The name alone made my stomach twist. Laura hadn't called once in all those years, not for birthdays, not for graduations, not even to ask how Emily was doing. I managed a steady tone. "And what do you want?" Emily shrugged, her voice small. "I just want to know why she left?" Against every instinct screaming no, I told her to go ahead. Maybe it would give her closure. Maybe it would finally stop the questions I'd seen in her eyes since she was a child. A week later, she met Laura for coffee. When she returned, there was a glow I hadn't seen in years, like she'd discovered a missing piece of herself. I wanted to be happy for her. I really did. But soon, her tone started to change. "Mom said you made it hard for her to stay," she mentioned casually one night. The words cut deeper than I let on. I tried to stay calm. "Emily, you were there. You know who walked away?" She just frowned, saying, "People change, Dad." Over the next few months, calls became shorter. She stopped asking for advice, started defending Laura whenever I tried to express concern. It felt like I was watching her drift toward a storm she couldn't see. Every time she said "Mom" now, there was warmth in her voice, the kind of warmth she used to reserve for me. That's when I realized. Laura hadn't just come back into Emily's life. She was slowly rewriting mine out of it. A few months after Laura's return, Emily invited me to dinner. She said she wanted me to meet someone important. I assumed it was her boyfriend, maybe even a fiancé. I was wrong. When I arrived, Laura greeted me at the door, polished as ever, with that same rehearsed smile that never reached her eyes. And beside her stood a tall, broad-shouldered man in an expensive suit. "Dad, this is Tom," Emily said, her voice bright. "Mom's husband." I forced a polite smile and shook his hand, but his grip was too firm, the kind of handshake meant to assert dominance. "I've heard a lot about you," he said smoothly. "You did a great job raising Emily. Must have been hard doing it all alone." His tone wasn't admiration. It was condescension, thinly veiled as charm. Dinner was suffocating. Tom dominated every conversation, from Emily's future career to how modern families should work together without resentment. Laura nodded along, occasionally placing her hand on his arm as if to punctuate his superiority. I barely touched my food. Every time I tried to share a story about Emily's childhood, Tom would interrupt with, "That's sweet." But Emily's really grown past all that now. After dinner, Emily walked me to the door. "He's really good for Mom," she said, almost defensive. "He makes her happy." I nodded, forcing warmth into my voice. If she's happy, that's what matters. But as I drove home, my jaw clenched so tight it hurt. In the weeks that followed, Tom started appearing in every photo Emily posted online, family dinners, trips, birthdays. He wasn't just her mother's husband anymore. He was inserting himself into our history, piece by piece. And I could feel my place shrinking every day, like someone was quietly erasing me from the story I'd built with my daughter. It's strange how distance doesn't always start with miles. Sometimes it begins with tone. Emily's voice over the phone grew polite, almost scripted. The long, warm conversations we used to have about her classes, her dreams, her fears, they turned into quick updates and awkward silences. "Sorry, Dad, I've got to go," she'd say, her voice distracted. "Tom's taking us out to dinner?" Us. That word hit me harder than I'd ever admit. At first I tried to be understanding. I told myself she was busy, that growing up meant building her own life. But the changes were subtle and deliberate. She stopped visiting on holidays, claiming her mom had already planned something. When I'd suggest coming along, there'd be hesitation followed by that familiar line, "Dad, let's not make it complicated." One afternoon, a neighbor mentioned seeing Emily's graduation photos on Facebook, ones I'd never even received. I searched them up and there it was. Emily, in her cap and gown, Laura on one side, Tom on the other, arms around her. The caption read, "Grateful for my amazing parents." I stared at that photo for a long time, trying to understand when I'd been replaced in my own daughter's story. When I finally called her, my voice shook. "Emily, why didn't you tell me about the ceremony?" She sighed. "Dad, it was a last-minute invite thing, and Mom handled the photos." "You could have called," I said quietly. Her reply was sharp, defensive. "I don't need to explain everything to you. Please stop making me feel guilty." That night I sat alone at the kitchen table, staring at her childhood drawing still pinned to the fridge. The one where she'd written me and my hero. The edges were yellowed now, but the ache it brought felt brand new. I realized then I wasn't just losing my daughter. I was being quietly edited out of her life. A year passed before I heard real excitement in Emily's voice again. She called one Sunday morning, her tone bright and bubbling like it used to be. "Dad, I have news," she said. "Mark proposed last night, time getting married." I could hear the joy in her voice, and for a moment every wound, every silence, every distant moment between us just faded. My heart filled with pride. "That's incredible, sweetheart," I said, smiling so hard my cheeks ached. "Tell me everything." She told me about Mark, a software engineer she met through work. Kind, steady, someone who made her feel safe. I could tell she was happy, and that alone gave me hope. When she said she wanted my opinion on venues and flowers, I nearly choked up. It felt like she was inviting me back into her life. Maybe the wedding could mend what had been broken. Asterisk a few weeks later. She invited me to a family brunch to celebrate the engagement. I showed up early, nervous, but eager to make things right. Laura and Tom were already there, sitting comfortably like they owned the room. Tom greeted me with his usual smirk. "Good to see you again, champ," he said, patting my back like I was a guest in my own family. Emily arrived, glowing, showing off her ring. Her laughter like sunlight through glass, but throughout the meal, I couldn't shake the unease. Every story Emily shared somehow looped back to Tom. How he helped her with financial planning, how he gave great advice about the proposal. I smiled through it all, but the truth was gnawing at me. Tom wasn't just part of her new life. He was rewriting his way into her past, into our story. Still, as Emily hugged me goodbye and said, "You'll walk me down the aisle, right?" I held on to that promise like oxygen. I didn't know then that it would be the last time I'd ever hear her say those words. 2 months before the wedding, I came home to find a thick white envelope sitting in my mailbox. The handwriting on the front was elegant. Emily's. My heart leaped. Maybe it was the invitation. Maybe this was finally my chance to stand beside her again, to walk her down that aisle like I'd dreamed since she was a little girl. I sat down at the kitchen table and carefully opened it. Inside was a beautifully printed wedding invitation, cream-colored gold lettering, the works. But as I read through the guest list, my hands froze. My name wasn't there. Instead, under parents of the bride, it read, Laura and Tom Williams. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I called her immediately, my chest tight. Hey, sweetheart, I just got the invitation. It's beautiful. I think there's been a mix-up. There was silence on the other end. Then Emily spoke, her voice trembling. Dad, it's not a mistake. What do you mean? I asked, my throat dry. You're not coming, she said softly. It's just, things are complicated. Mom and Tom feel it would be better this way. My voice cracked. Better how, Emily? I'm your father, she started crying. You've always made things tense between them, and I just want peace at my wedding. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After 20 years of sacrifice, after raising her through every scraped knee and sleepless night, I was being erased again for the sake of her mother's comfort. And who's walking you down the aisle then? I asked, already knowing the answer. Her silence told me everything. Then she whispered, Tom will. My world tilted. My vision blurred. I hung up without another word and just sat there, staring at the invitation. The gold lettering seemed to mock me like a monument to betrayal. The little girl who once called me her hero had just replaced me with the man who took my place. And for the first time in my life, I felt like a ghost at my own daughter's wedding. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying our call in my head, her shaky voice, her apologetic tone. The way she said better this way, as if erasing me was somehow logical. By morning, something inside me broke. I grabbed my keys, drove 2 hours to her house, and parked outside. Staring at the front door like it was a wall between two worlds, the one I'd built and the one I'd lost. When she finally opened the door, her expression froze. Dad, you shouldn't have come. Her voice was quiet, almost rehearsed. Then I saw Laura appear behind her, arms folded and that smug look on her face that I'd come to know too well. We already talked about this, Laura said sharply. You showing up here uninvited isn't helping. I ignored her and turned to Emily. Sweetheart, please. I just want to understand. I've always been here for you. Every sacrifice I made, every choice, it was for you. You're my daughter. Right. My voice cracked mid-sentence. Emily's eyes softened for a moment. Then Tom's voice cut through the air from inside the house. Em, don't let him guilt you again. We've moved past all that. She looked torn, standing between the father who raised her and the people who rewrote her reality. Dad, she whispered, I'm sorry, but this is my decision. I took a step forward. No, it's their decision. You're just repeating their words. Her eyes welled up, and for a brief second, I saw the little girl she used to be, scared, confused, wanting peace at any cost. Laura put a hand on Emily's shoulder and said coldly, I think it's time for you to leave. I stood there, numb, my heart pounding as the door closed in my face. On the drive home, I barely noticed the road. It felt like I was mourning someone who was still alive, a daughter who'd forgotten who taught her how to love. The morning of the wedding arrived like a cruel joke, bright, beautiful, and silent. I sat in my small living room, still wearing the same worn-out flannel I'd had since Emily was in high school. On the coffee table sat a framed photo of her 8th birthday party, frosting on her nose. Me behind her holding the cake, both of us laughing like the world couldn't touch us. I traced my thumb over the glass and whispered, You made me believe love could fix anything. Outside, the world carried on, but time had stopped for me. My phone buzzed every few minutes. Notifications, updates, tagged posts. Against my better judgment, I opened one. There she was.
My daughter,
dressed in white, radiant. Tom at her side, walking her down the aisle. The caption on Laura's post read, A perfect day with the perfect family. My chest tightened until it hurt to breathe. Every photo felt like a knife. Her smile, the dance, the speeches. In one, Tom was giving a toast, his arm around Emily as she beamed up at him. The comments read things like, What an amazing dad figure. And so beautiful to see blended families thrive. No one knew the truth. No one knew that the man who'd raised her, who'd starved so she could eat, who'd worked through pain so she could dream, was sitting alone in a dark room, uninvited to the very life he'd built. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey and stared at the wedding invitation still pinned to my fridge. I don't know how long I sat there, but at some point, the weight of everything finally broke me. I slid to the floor and cried. Not just for her, but for every moment I'd believed love could shield me from betrayal. And in that silence, surrounded by memories that no longer belonged to me, I realized the cruelest part wasn't being forgotten. It was knowing I'd been replaced, and she didn't even notice. The days after the wedding felt like a fog I couldn't shake. Every time I walked past the kitchen, I saw that invitation pinned to the fridge, mocking me. Eventually, I took it down and stared at it one last time before tearing it clean in half. I'd spent years begging for scraps of love from people who didn't deserve my pain. But that night, something in me shifted. Not anger, not revenge, just resolve. Instead of calling her again, I sat at my desk and pulled out a pen. If Emily wouldn't hear my voice, she'd read my words. I started the letter slowly, my handwriting shaky. My dearest Emily, I won't make this about blame. I just want you to remember the truth. I wrote about the first time she rode a bike without training wheels, how she looked back and shouted, "You can let go, Dad," and how I never really did, not until now. I reminded her of the nights I stayed up sewing her costumes, the weekends I skipped rest so she could go to dance lessons, the time she got sick and I slept on the floor beside her bed just to hear her breathe. Every memory spilled onto the page like blood I'd been holding in for years. Then, at the end, I wrote, "I won't come between you and the life you've chosen. But one day, when the noise fades and truth feels quiet again, I hope you'll remember who loved you first, and without conditions. That was me. It will always be me." I sealed the letter with an old photo of us, her, on my shoulders, holding a paper crown she made that said "World's Best Dad." I drove to her house that night, left the envelope on her porch, and walked away without looking back. For the first time in years, I wasn't trying to win her back. I was setting myself free. I didn't expect a response. Honestly, I didn't even want one. Leaving that letter felt like closing a chapter I'd been trapped inside for too long. The next morning, I packed a small bag, locked the house, and drove toward the coast. Somewhere quiet, somewhere I could breathe without seeing her face on every wall. The radio played softly as the miles rolled by, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like peace. 3 days later, my phone started ringing. Unknown number. I ignored it. Then again, finally, a voicemail came through. Emily's voice, trembling. "Dad, I got your letter. I don't know what to say. I'm so sorry. Please call me." I listened once, then again, each word cracking through the calm I'd built. She'd read it. She felt it. But I couldn't go back. It's not yet. Maybe not ever. A few days after that, a mutual friend from our old neighborhood texted me. She's been crying for days. Said she didn't realize how much she'd hurt you until she read your letter. I stared at that message for a long time. For a moment, I almost picked up the phone. But then I remembered how she'd erased me. Not in anger, but indifference. And indifference is something love can't survive. Instead, I turned off my phone and walked to the water. The ocean was calm, silver under the setting sun. I stood there, waves brushing my shoes, and whispered, "This is my goodbye." The wind carried it away, and with it, the last of my resentment. Emily would remember my letter not because it was bitter, but because it came from a man who finally loved himself, enough to stop begging for love in return. I didn't need her to understand today. I just needed her to never forget. Months passed. The days no longer bled into one another. They started to find their own rhythm again. I found a small place near the coast. Nothing fancy, just quiet. The mornings smelled of salt and pine, and the nights were filled with the sound of waves colliding with the shore. I started fishing again, reading books I hadn't touched in years. It was strange how healing could feel so uneventful, just calm, empty, but not lonely. Then one evening I opened my email, something I hadn't checked in weeks, and there it was. A message from Emily. The subject line simply read, "I'm sorry." My hands trembled as I clicked it open. Wrote that she'd finally seen through the lies, how Tom and her mother had fed her stories for years about how I'd tried to control everything, how I drove her mother away. She said she believed them because she wanted to believe in a perfect family, even if it meant painting me as the villain. "But your letter," she wrote, "it made me remember everything, who you were, how you looked at me when I was scared, how you always showed up. I can't undo what I did, but I need you to know. I see it now." Stared at the screen for a long time. The apology was real. The guilt was heavy in every word. But I couldn't respond, not yet. Some wounds don't heal by reopening them. Instead, I closed the laptop and whispered, "I forgive you, kiddo. Just live better than you were taught." That night, I wrote in my journal, "Love doesn't always come back, but truth always finds its way home." For the first time, I slept peacefully, not because she'd apologized, but because I finally stopped needing her to. 2 years later, I heard from a friend back in town that Emily's marriage had fallen apart. Tom had cheated with one of Laura's coworkers, of all people, and left without a word. Laura, ever the dramatist, turned on Emily, blaming her for breaking the family. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who'd once convinced her I was toxic had devoured each other in the end. A week after that call, I received a letter in the mail, no return address, just my name written in her familiar handwriting. Inside was a single page. "Dad," it began, "you were right about everything. I didn't see the truth until it was too late. I miss you. I wish I could take it all back." I read it twice, then folded it gently and set it on my desk. There were no tears this time, just a deep, quiet understanding that life had come full circle. That night, I sat by the ocean watching the tide crawl across the sand. My phone buzzed with a new message, a number I knew too well. "Can we talk? Please." I stared at it for a long time, then typed my reply slowly. "I wish you peace." I already found mine. I hit send, then slipped my phone back into my pocket and closed my eyes. The sound of the waves was soft, rhythmic, almost like breathing. For years, I'd carried the weight of betrayal, trying to fix a love that didn't want to be fixed. But in the end, my peace wasn't in revenge or in being proven right. It was in finally choosing myself. The sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the water gold. And for the first time in a long, painful story, I let her go, and it didn't hurt anymore.